Lake Champlain, located in the northeastern part of the United States, bordered by New York State on the west, Vermont on the east, and the province of Quebec on the north. It is the sixth largest freshwater lake in the country, 125 miles long and 15 miles at its widest point. Lake Champlain's crystal clear surface covers 500 square miles and can drop to depths of over 400 feet in some spots. Portions of the shoreline are occupied by seasonal homes, but the main residents are concentrated in several towns and cities, like Plattsburgh on the New York side and Burlington across the lake in Vermont. Lake Champlain is a go-to destination for relaxation and vacations, but there is one drawback. Some believe the lake harbors a monster. The monster of Lake Champlain has been called one of the continent's great unsolved mysteries of science. A giant prehistoric beast lurking in the depths of the lake. Hundreds of eyewitnesses over 4 centuries claim to have seen it.
Don't know for sure what it is, but something came up along the side of the boat.
I don't know what I saw, but it was eerie and it was unsettling.
Something caught the corner of my eye, but it definitely something was there.
We turned around, we were looking at it, and it was a black neck and head.
This is totally, this is probably the closest rendition of anything I've ever seen that has been put together that fills the bill of what I saw.
Their testimonials all describe a creature weighing several tons and measuring over 30 feet.
There were 3 large humps protruding from this calm lake surface, motionless, and they just very slowly sunk beneath the surface of the lake.
What I saw was sort of greenish-brown, brownish-green. And it didn't have any features other than this sort of roundish, post-looking thing.
What we saw was a black neck and head of something.
These are the size of the fins that came out of the water. This size, that size, 4 jobbies that were purple, and this was all this pink color.
Journalists, explorers, scientists, residents, and tourists, more than 300 in all, are convinced they've seen a monster in the lake. The first person to claim they'd seen it was none other than explorer Samuel de Champlain. Lake Champlain features dozens of bays and over 70 islands. According to witnesses, the lake monster has some favorite spots in this immense body of water. Bulwaga Bay, at the southern end of the lake, is where sightings occur most frequently. This small bay is only about 30 feet deep and considered an angler's paradise. With its school of brown and rainbow trout, carp, and catfish, Bulwaga Bay is a hotspot for everyone hoping to lure a trophy fish. Although people claim to have spotted something monstrous lurking beneath the surface of the bay, the big one always seems to get away. After first revealing itself to Samuel de Champlain in 1609, the mysterious creature made several later appearances in Bulwaga Bay, including one in 1887 to a group of railway workers. After that, for whatever reason, the lake monster seems to have shied away and remained hidden for over 100 years. In the 20th century, the monster finally rose to fame. In 1930, with the upgrading of Highway 22 that runs alongside the bay, an increase in travelers coming into the area led to an increase in reported sightings. That's when the creature earned its official name, Champ, and it soon became a star attraction from Port Henry to Burlington.
In the 1990s, there was a flurry of Champ sightings. There's several books on Champ came out, a lot of newspaper stories, some of which I was writing, and people came forward all the time with Champ sighting. This board was put in back in the 1980s. It was originally designed to be sort of an evolving board that would catalog everyone who's ever seen Champ.
It was in early December. We were coming back from the Lake George area along the lakeshore below Port Henry to South Port Henry on a Sunday afternoon. And so I was looking out the window, and all of a sudden I see this post-like thing. So I turn to Bob and I say, "What's that post-like thing out there?" And when I look back, it was gone. There was no post, but there were concentric circles of water, you know, like big round ripples going out. And posts just don't disappear like that. We couldn't see anything. The lake was flat, nothing was there, but it wasn't my imagination. I believe in Champ.
Because Route 22 runs straight through Port Henry, the village is considered to be Champ's official residence. At first glance, Port Henry has all the traditional charm of small-town America. A courthouse, a Liberty Bell, fine dining in heritage buildings, 2 well-attended churches. But the town also worships 2 local VIPs, Johnny Padres, a Major League Baseball legend, and Champ.
Why should you come to Port Henry? Well, I mean, all you need to do is look at the area. It looks like a European village on a hillside. It's just absolutely spectacular. And of course, we have our world-famous resident, Champ, who, you know, to this day, even myself, you know, you can't look out on the Lake Champlain without looking for something out there that may be different.
The city is so attached to its monster that authorities have declared the lake a protected sanctuary for Champ. A formal public decree forbids anyone to harm, abuse, harass, or otherwise attempt to destroy it. It can be approached, observed, and even caressed, but under no circumstances can anyone hurt it. Port Henry has about 1,200 full-time residents. During the summer season, that number grows tenfold. Its 2 marinas are huge draws for boaters, anglers, and, because of Champ, lovers of strange phenomena. But if anyone were to declare a national sport in the village of Port Henry, the search for the lake monster would be the unanimous choice, hands down. Residents with waterfront properties have a front row seat for observing their lake 24/7.
We bought our summer house from an old merchant marine who had traveled the world on freighters. And one of my first days here, I'll never forget this, we were out fishing in a very small boat off Port Henry here. And he looked at me and he said, "Ron, there are some very strange things in this lake." That sentence hung in my mind and really mesmerized me and stayed with me from the ages of 13 to my late 20s, when that sentence came back into play. And I'll tell you what happened to that. In 1981, there were a flurry of champ sightings in the Port Henry area. And I was working as a newspaper reporter for the Albany and New York Times Union, which is the major daily paper in Albany, New York, the capital city. And my editors were interested in seeing all these news reports about Champ being sighted just 2 hours north of Albany, this major lake, Lake Champlain. And I wrote a 6-part series chronicling the flurry of activity in the Port Henry area. It was a good story. My paper played it big. So at the time when I was writing the piece and when the pieces were published, I didn't care whether there was a monster in the lake or not. But 2 years later, almost to the day, my perspective changed dramatically. July 4th weekend, 1983. I am fishing with my girlfriend. Lake Champlain is like glass. And my girlfriend is in the front of the boat. She says, "Ron, what's that?" I don't pay a whole lot of attention. We're being quiet, we're fishing, trying to catch fish. She says again, "Ron, what's that?" And she points, and I look to where she's pointing. And we watched for probably 10 seconds, 3 large humps that looked like large tires sticking maybe a foot, foot and a half out of the water, motionless. After seeing these 3 large humps out of the water, looking back, I have to conclude, although I haven't seen anything since, and I've been on the lake most every day in the last 5 or 6 years in the summer, you have to come to the conclusion that there's something unexplained in the lake, and it could very well be, in my mind, a plesiosaur. It could be something that escapes all of our imagination and may be there yet to be discovered.
People who live along the shore of Lake Champlain aren't the only ones interested in Champ. Scientists are also getting caught up in the mystery.
Experience the past like never before with History Hit's award-winning original documentaries and ad-free podcasts with our expert historians like Dan Snow, Susanna Lipscomb, Lucy Worsley, Mary Beard, Tristan Hughes, and myself, Matt Lewis. Sign up for an exclusive discount using the link in the description and embark on your historical journey from the wonders of ancient Egypt and the life of Anne Boleyn to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte and the discovery of Shackleton's Endurance. Get history wherever, whenever, exclusively on History Hit.
I think he looks like a big fish, kind of like a dinosaur from prehistoric times.
We are now on the other side of Lake Champlain, in the town of Burlington, Vermont. If Port Henry offers the best places to spot Champ, then Burlington qualifies as the nerve center for local marine research. The scientific body known as the Leahy Center for Lake Champlain organized a gathering to help unravel the mystery of its local monster.
My name is Linda Bowden. I am the Science Education Specialist, and we have an exciting program today. It's called Champ, the Unsolved Mystery.
Dozens of theories have been put forward about the monster. Then, in 1977, a photo appears that grabs the attention of the scientific community.
One of the most compelling pieces of evidence that we have is the photograph that Sandra Mancy took in 1977. So the photograph looks a lot like what you were saying, a plesiosaur. When she first took that photograph, she wasn't certain what she saw, but it was something that was very dangerous in her mind. She needed to get the kids out of the lake. They were swimming there when this creature came up behind. That is the only photograph, the only clear photograph of Champ that's out there right now.
The Mansi photograph displays the unmistakable profile of a monster. Champ appears to be a species of aquatic dinosaur known as a plesiosaurus.
She took the photo to the New York Times, and the New York Times took it to an analyst who determined that it wasn't a fraud, it wasn't a fake, and the New York Times ran the photo. It's since been reproduced in numerous magazines, newspapers. It's been in specials about Champ. The Mansi photo is regarded as the most definitive proof that Champ exists.
Some in the scientific community needed proof the image wasn't an optical illusion before they would accept Champ as the real thing. In-depth analysis determined the photo was not a fraud and concluded the creature in the photo actually was Champ.
I have seen the Mansi photograph, and I've read some of the various analyses of that photograph, and it's a little bit of a mystery still, which is part of what makes it all exciting. It shows what looks to be a creature's head. It just looks like one of those toy dinosaurs from when I was a small child. And so if you imagine the head of a brontosaurus or something like that, gosh, this would look a lot like that.
When I first saw the Sandra Mansi photograph, I thought she'd taken a photo of a plesiosaur. I thought that this was absolute proof that Champ exists.
The Mansi photograph was reported to be taken in the area of Missisquoi Bay, in the northern part of the lake. However, in the area that Sandra Mansi reported taking the photograph, the water of the lake is about 14, 15 feet deep. It's not very deep. So a large creature would have a very hard time, quite a challenge, hiding in that shallow depth of water.
Even though Lake Champlain reaches depths of up to 410 feet, skeptical scientists believe it's highly unlikely such a massive animal could thrive here, let alone reproduce in such a restricted habitat.
In order to maintain a population over a long time, there probably would need to be 40 or 50 champ-like creatures here to breed and to withstand the rigors of time. A very small population of one couple or one pair would really not be sufficient.
Another argument that challenges Champ's existence concerns the chronological order in which dinosaur species became extinct.
The plesiosaur hypothesis is an interesting idea. It has a lot of appeal to some people, and they can imagine what it might look like. However, the environment here has not been very good for a persistent population of plesiosaurs. For one thing, the rest of the world saw the extinction of the plesiosaurs about 65 million years ago. So when we talk about the history of Lake Champlain, it's 10,000 years. So we have to remember that the plesiosaurs went extinct 65,000 years ago.
Lake Champlain was formed after the disappearance of Ice Age glaciers and the vast sea around it. This dramatic transformation of the geography in the region had a major impact. Saltwater gave way to freshwater. Desalination made it highly unlikely that any sea creature could survive in such an environment. Science hasn't explained all of life's mysteries. Champ may be one of them.
Let's take a look at some of the crypto or cryptids, as they're called, animals that have been out there. One of the first ones was Kraken. as you may know, the giant sea serpent, right? Now, the giant squid, as they're called, have eyes the size of dinner plates. They have a very sharp beak. And it wasn't until 2006 that Japanese scientists actually got on film this giant squid. So what was a cryptid became, yes, in fact, this animal is real. And it was in water over 2,900 feet. So what do you think now about Champ? Could he be a cryptid? Could he be something out in the water? We're not so sure. So I think we're constantly finding things that are in our seas, in our lakes, in our oceans that we didn't know were there before. And I think people are relating to that information saying, oh, well, if folks are discovering new things, then why cannot they discover a lake monster too?
Seeing Champ, I just think that there are things in my worldview that I believe we don't know everything. There's room for things that we don't know. And so I find myself gazing out at the lake at times, if I'm reading or walking. I know people that say they don't believe in Champ, and you can catch them looking, crossing the ferry. At one time, geologically, when the sea was connected to the lake, why wouldn't it be possible for sea creatures that we don't know about to have come into Lake Champlain and then adapted their existence in Lake Champlain? We don't know. And it's interesting not to know.
Somebody said it was a duck later on. You know, like, you saw a duck, don't worry about it.
It looked like a post, except it certainly wasn't.
My buddy was saying, hey, it's ducks, something swimming.
Right, ducks.
No, ducks don't swim at night, and they quack.
Objects floating or moving across a lake surface can sometimes fool the eye. Because our eyes, brains, and emotional states aren't always on the same wavelength, we can't be sure that what we're seeing is actually there. Spotted from a distance, a duck or a tree trunk can have multiple interpretations. In a split second, we might think we see something that, frankly, doesn't exist.
So turn around, what do you see?
A rabbit.
A rabbit. Okay, turn back around. I'm going to change the photo. All right, now turn. What do you see? Tell me. A duck? A rabbit? Okay. Okay. So by turning the rabbit, our perceptions changed. It's still a rabbit. You're a little confused as to what it could possibly be. It's fun to watch how folks sit there and change their mind during the presentation and are beginning to believe that people may be seeing something out on the lake. Not sure exactly what it could be, but they do believe that there is something happening out on the lake.
I was working on the ferry boat Champlain coming back from Port Kent, New York on a hot August afternoon, and we were sitting up on the deck. And I was reading and happened to look up, and came upon the sighting of these two fins that came out of the water. The folks that were with me sitting on the benches on the boat all ran up, pointed out, and asked what it is, and I was a crew member, and as a crew member I had to, after the second one came out of the water, I had to explain that it definitely is Champ. Everybody ran to the rail, and now everyone's jumping up, down. Kids are picking up popcorn, throwing it in, feeding Champ. Everybody's quite excited, and this was my first physical sighting, and I do believe that there is something here that is part of the lake's heritage.
3 ferry boats service Lake Champlain between New York State and Vermont. Dozens of daily crossings with hundreds of passengers means thousands of pairs of eyes scanning the horizon at any time.
I came to work for Lake Champlain Ferries in 1980, in the spring of 1980. And I kayak a lot too out here. I house sit around here a lot, so plus my career here, I'm here a lot. And it's a pretty amazing place. Not a bad office. I do recall one spring where we had some high water and some wind, and I was actually working on deck, and the captain I was working with, Cindy, we both saw this long chunk of something with a little thing coming up like this, and it was clearly a log. I said, you just wait, somebody's gonna come and ask us. And sure enough, maybe the following week, a woman came aboard with an 8 by 10 size photo of this chunk of log, and she asked us, did you see this at all? And we said, yes, it's over there on that shoreline, and it's a big chunk. So that's probably, for me, the closest, that I can say there was something out there that looked like Champ, or looked like something unusual.
What they do see is a wonderful, fertile grounds for speculation. There are many large animals in Lake Champlain, but large means 5 or 6 feet long, 2 meters perhaps. We have the sturgeon, the lake sturgeon. It's quite an impressive thing. There's a channel catfish that can be very large, and there also could be 2 or 3 otters swimming in succession, one behind another, playing and looking like it's a single animal. Now, there are some other possible explanations for what people have seen that look dynamic, they look alive, and that can happen when the wake of a boat, a wave train that is called the bow wake, from the prow of a boat that is moving through the lake. That is a train of waves that will pass right across the lake and be seen by people far removed from the boat itself.
The public is split into opposite camps where Champ is concerned. There are the believers and those who believe the lake monster is a far-fetched legend. The fact remains, more than 300 eyewitnesses are convinced about what they saw. Could all 300 individuals be mistaken? For the answer, it might be helpful to trace the monster's movements, beginning in Bulwaga Bay. Jim Carroll is one of the few people who claim to have had 2 close encounters with Champ, experiences that he believes have taught him something about the creature's habits.
Oh, I've been on the lake for 40 years. We're out there all the time. We go out a lot. We take a lot of people out. And you're always looking, every time you're on the water, you're always looking for Champ. At some point, somebody's going to capture something on film, and we're going to have proof.
Jim's boat has all the equipment necessary to locate Champ, and he's set his compass heading for the specific locations where it's likely to be found. Passing tourists are a regular part of his expeditions. According to Jim, Champ only appears when the lake surface is relatively calm and the wind's blowing from light to gentle. Jim bases his measurements on the Beaufort wind force scale. The scale allows him to calculate the strength of the wind by correlating its effects both on water and land. The Beaufort scale grades wind force from 0 to 10. The higher the number, the lower the chances of spotting Champ. Most sightings occur when the wind strength falls between 0 and 3. Today, Jim and his passengers get lucky. Conditions are ideal.
So here we are, and this is where we started. And when I was a kid, we were water skiing right here in the bay, just off.
Oh, that way?
Yeah. It's time to get going at a water skier. So we checked, make sure he's okay, and then I turned around and looked off to the side of the boat. Make sure, you look ahead, make sure you're not going to run anything over. And right next to the boat, there was something that was alive. It's like that wide. This big long hump that was as long as the boat. It was this little 16-foot ski boat. It was a little disconcerting. Whatever it was alive and just kind of disappeared into the water up front and off to the back of the boat. So my buddy who was driving. We grabbed the wheel, spun around, went to the yeah, like get in the boat. It's like, but it's my turn to ski. Get in the boat. You can see where the farmland, the right hand one of those two, that's Arnold Bay.
Were you afraid? You thought?
Yeah, I mean, didn't know what it was. How often do you see a fish that's bigger than the boat you're in? It's kind of like right out of Jaws.
Did you see it again?
I did, as an adult. We were actually, it was in this bay.
Twice?
Yeah. My kids were little, and we were out to dinner, and it was a nice night, and we were just putting back because we had babysitters. And it was over here, actually in this shore. We were just putting along, enjoying the warm weather and the flat calm. And my wife says, "What's that?" And because I'd read up on Champ a bit and gotten over that initial fear from way too long ago, instead of turning the wheel and pulling away, we spun the wheel and we headed over towards it. And whatever it was moving away from us. We moved after it, and we watched it, and it disappeared. And then all of a sudden, it's on the other side of the boat. And the couple that was with us, fella was saying, well, it's not Champ. Like, yes, it is. Whatever it is alive. It was swimming, and it moved away from us over here, and it came back. Now it's on this side of the boat.
Conditions are ideal. The chance for a monster meetup is as good as it gets. But Jim won't get his third encounter with it today. Champ is nowhere in sight.
So with all of that, in the evenings, on a summer night, when you're looking out over the lake and you see something you're not quite sure about, think about the fact that you might be seeing Champ. Anytime you have a conversation about Champ, you'll find people turn around and want to talk to you about this amazing creature. So it's a very popular program that we do here at Echo.
From the time Samuel de Champlain first spotted Champ, the monster has never strayed very far from Port Henry. It's why Champ occupies a central place in the region's cultural heritage and tourism. Everyone has a story to tell, a monster to celebrate. Today, the storytelling is happening here in Port Henry's old library at a gathering of Champ's newest fans.
This book is called Champ and Me by the Maple Tree by Ed Shankman. In the valley of Vermont, near a lake called Champlain, if you cut through the woods on the old country lane, you'll come to a meadow with one maple tree that's as high as a person can see. Do you believe that Champ is out there?
Yes.
Think he is? Yeah? Have you ever seen him? No. Have you known anybody who thought they saw him?
Yes.
Tell us a...
Babysitter's husband, he thought he saw Champ because they have a nice view of the lake.
And the story of Champ goes back not just into the 70s or the 80s, but you know, you talk to people that were that grew up with my dad, you know, that fished on Lake Champlain. You know, they've seen something out there that that was different. You know, even during the ice fishing season, they would see these shadows, you know, as they're sitting in their fish shanties, and you know, you're looking down your hole and you're fishing. All of a sudden, you just see this dark shadow, you know, fill the holes up. And then, bang, you can see down in there again. So I believe that definitely something out there. And again, you know, while you're visiting Port Henry, you know, I'm certain that, you know, most areas in the village of Port Henry, you can see Lake Champlain. So you're gonna be looking east, and you're gonna be looking for our most famous resident, Champ.
Port Henry is the hub for several annual Champ celebrations that draw scores of tourists to the area. Since the early 1990s, the first Saturday of August is declared Champ Day, with activities for the whole family. Amidst street parades and sidewalk sales, Champ is honored as the local hero of the day. Later in the year on Labor Day, organizers invite Champ to be their guest of honor at the annual celebration. Alongside explorer Samuel de Champlain, Champ gets a chance to stroll down Main Street before submerging back into his watery home. This once feared monster has become one of the main attractions for visitors to the region. Campgrounds, festivals, and commercial promotions all feature Champ in some tasty way or another. This celebrity sea monster now appears more often out of water than it does in the lake itself. Champ's star power has been a windfall for the tourism industry.
We started Champ's Trading Post because we found there was not really anyone out there who was doing Champ paraphernalia for sale for souvenirs. So we developed our own line that includes t-shirts and hats and shot glasses and mugs that have Champ on them. They've done really, really well for us. We find that it's really helped our business having the name Champs and drawing people in. People come in, they say, oh, we've looked everywhere for Champ things, we're having a hard time finding them. They're thrilled to be able to find what they're looking for, to take something home for their kids, or just a souvenir of being here looking for Champ.
After you've been spending all this time looking for Champ, there's a couple interesting historical spots you may be interested in. One of them is at Crown Point, which is just to the south of here. And there's an old ruins of the old fort there, and you can just wander through. Something a little more structured is Fort Ticonderoga, which is a historic site. They do reenactments of the different battles that Fort Ticonderoga was involved in.
The kind of people that come into our store are people that know about the Champ legend, are intrigued by it, have their own stories. Some have a lot of questions. They've never heard of him. And it's just fun to hear the different stories and to, talk to people about what they think Champ is.
And at the end of the day, sit out with a glass of wine on the deck and then just enjoy the sun on the lake and maybe in those last moments, you'll see Champ off in the distance.
Port Henry is a magnificent place. It is among the most beautiful places on earth. Lake Champlain is an incredible lake to behold and to enjoy. And I think the residents of Port Henry are incredibly lucky to have such beauty and such majesty in their backyard.
If you come to Vermont near a lake called Champlain and you cut through the woods on the old country lane, there's a chance you will see my friend Champ and me playing happy and free by the old maple tree. And that's the end.
When it comes to monsters, eyewitnesses, skeptics, researchers, and explorers all seem to agree. Champ is a full citizen of the communities around Lake Champlain.
Now, Champ is part of who we are. Champy in New York and also up in Quebec, very revered as an iconic sort of symbol for our area. There are potato chips also that are called Champ. There's different car washes, Champ. And of course, there are many different kinds of monuments. The lake monster for the baseball team here is Champ.
Lake Champlain is a lake that is powerful, dynamic, full of surprises. There's something mysterious and wild about Lake Champlain.
Every single time I'm near the lake, whether I'm fishing, whether I'm sailing, my fishing tackle box, I carry a camera with me. I may be the next person who claims to have the definitive picture of the Lake Champlain monster.
Well, you're always looking for that, for Champ. And chances are that when you're here visiting, you're going to spot him.
I'm one of the people who actually saw Champ. I'm not afraid of it.
If you truly believe or you want to, just chant, just Champ, and just Champ. You never know. I'm serious.
I'm not ready to close the book on Champ, ever.
I do believe everything I've seen, everything I've heard, and especially with this personal sighting of something physical, that I could actually say, yes, that's why, I'm here sharing this to let you know that it works, Champ's good, and we need more Champs. Certainly.
So many people have such a great affection to the idea of a Champlain creature. And so I think the best habitat for Champ, where Champ really lives, is in the hearts and the minds of many, many people.
Welcome to Tennessee in the southeastern United States. Day or night, the state is home to all genres of music. From bluegrass to country, Delta blues to rock and roll. The legendary clubs along Beale Street in Memphis were among the first to feature Elvis Presley and Johnny Cash. Nashville, the state capital, is also the capital of country music recording. But something that's frequently overlooked by visitors who come for the entertainment are the mountains and fertile plains of rural Tennessee. About 40 miles or 60 kilometers north of Nashville lies this quaint little town of Adams. Population 628. Visitors can expect to be treated to legendary Southern hospitality. But this peaceful setting is better known for something sinister. 200 years ago, apparitions and horrific events tormented a local family. Even today, some descendants feel they're still being shadowed by an evil spirit.
Beginning 196 years ago, Bells were tormented by what they called a spirit, the neighbors called a witch. Some people called a demon.
In the legend, John Bell was poisoned by the spirit who calls herself Kate.
Many things have been seen inside the local caves. Folks believe that spirits, orbs, even ghosts sometimes can be heard talking.
I have friends who have gone out there. They can feel the presence of the witch.
And when I went downstairs, I saw a ghost behind the stove.
I'm convinced something very, very bad was in that house.
And some believe it was trapped between two worlds, between the earth and the spirit world.
What it was, we really don't know.
The spirit was asked, where did you come from? Who are you and where did you come from? And he said, I am a spirit and I have been disturbed. I've been around for millions of years.
It had to be something very powerful to do what it did, but it never led on to what it actually was. They didn't understand why it was coming after our family. And when it was asked about why it was coming after the Bell family, or after John, the spirit said he just needs killing.
People in the area continue to claim to see sightings of the Bell Witch. They claim to hear her in the middle of the night. They hear the sounds of things in the house or maybe in the woods, and they will attribute that to the Bell Witch.
But it's supposed to be an eternal spirit. And, you know, most people look at it as some kind of witch riding around on a broom, but that's not how it's ever described by the Bells. They always describe it as a voice or an entity, and they claim they could see from time to time. It exhibited itself as either an animal or a human being. Now, the neighbors always heard the voices, but many of them said they did not see the form, that it sometimes manifested according to legend.
Well, you have your believers and you have your non-believers, and with that comes the extent of in both areas. You have some that are very hardcore. I don't believe in ghosts. I will not ever admit that there's a Bell Witch. And then you have the people who really believe that she existed and that she tormented this Bell family for years and that she continues to torment people in Robertson County as they visit Adams.
Supposedly one of the sons of John Bell had served with Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson came back and had a confrontation with this entity.
Andrew Jackson had a pleasant encounter with it, but it abused people that he was with, and he was quoted as saying he'd rather face the whole of the British Army as to face the Bell Witch again. Well, now it showed up as several different things in the story. It was like a turkey, a wolf, a little girl in a swing that when Betsy tried to talk to her, she disappeared.
The details of these hauntings aren't for the faint of heart. For nearly 2 centuries, the Bell Witch has fascinated and puzzled followers of the paranormal. Fear is constantly being evoked by fireside storytellers, books, a play, and even a Hollywood movie.
According to history, John Bell's death was attributed to a spirit, and it's the only person I know in the history of the United States whose death was attributed to a spirit.
The legend of the Bell Witch has been passed down from generation to generation in the town of Adams, Tennessee. And it's gone viral. It has all the elements of a classic ghost story: an old haunted house, furniture moving on its own, eerie sounds, and strange voices that come from nowhere. it's more than enough to convince anyone their home is possessed.
Let me tell you a little bit about the Bell house. In 1817, according to legend, the Bells began to experience a phenomenon they called the spirit. The neighbors called it a witch, and it began to torment the family, in particular, John Bell and his youngest daughter, Betsy. John Bell had a lot of health problems, and they blamed that on the spirit. He lost his shoes at times. They just literally fly off his feet, and they'd have to retrieve them. Betsy was slapped, had her covers removed at various times, had her hair tied in knots around the bedpost.
Betsy seemed to be targeted more than the other children and would have experiences during the night of being slapped, being pinched, her hair being torn. She would scream out in the middle of the night and the family would see to her. When visitors would come and spend the night to see if these stories were actually true, they too would experience this.
John at times could not talk. It was as if he had a stick crossways of his mouth. And then he would get better. This went on for about 2 or 3 years, until finally, on the 19th of December, 1820, John Bell became extremely sick. The doctor was called, and it was determined that he had been poisoned. They were beginning to wonder who did this. Did somebody in the family poison John Bell? Did Betsy do this? Did the neighbor do this? And all of a sudden, they hear the voice that they've heard so often in the house. And the spirit, as they call it, said, "I killed old John. I fixed his medicine last night, gave him a big dose of it, and he'll never get up out of that bed." And John Bell died.
I've come to the conclusion that something definitely did happen. I've seen a letter, a handwritten letter from 1820, the year John died, of 2 boys riding home to their mother on their trip to see the angel at the Bell house. And they were able to get to the house, and the first night, they said nothing happened, and the second night it happened, and said, "Mom, it's not an angel, it's the devil."
And this is part of the legend that continues on through the years. The Bell family is still here in Robertson County, and it has a bloodline that exists till to today. And because of that, the story just keeps getting passed generation to generation and is kept alive.
Bob Bell is one of those descendants. He has no doubts his family's stories are true. Like his 5th great-grandfather, John, Bob has also been a target inside his own home.
I had just gotten ready to get in the bed, and everything was really quiet then. And then I heard at the end of that hall, the double doors slam shut, both doors. And one of them latches, so they had to be unlatched, and they had to slam them shut. And there was footsteps came down the hall and stopped at my door, and the hair on my neck stood up. And me not being superstitious, I thought somebody was in the house. You know, I thought we had an intruder, and I was truly scared. That's probably the most scared I've ever been. So I went downstairs, I went to our gun cabinet, and I found a .45. I loaded it, put a round in the chamber, and I had it cocked. I was gonna shoot somebody. And I went room to room, SWAT team style, and took me about a half hour to go through the whole house because there's 2 sets of stairs. And I went back and forwards and looked everywhere in that house. There was nobody there. And I slept with the door locked, pistol by the bed, and my light on.
Many people believe the Bell Witch that stalked John Bell and his family isn't just an old legend. It's still around. Other people in Adams and Robertson County also have had close encounters with the spirit. Most happen inside a network of caves, once used for cold storage by farmers in the region. These dark, out-of-the-way caves can be dangerous places, but are perfect locations for paranormal activity. Cave explorers and casual visitors are warned not to enter unprepared. The most popular cave in the area is the one on the old Bell family farm. Most visitors who go there won't cross paths with the Bell Witch or any other spirit, but they could end up even worse off, cornering a wild animal in its lair.
Many of our local ghost stories have begun in caves. Voices, orbs, just about anything you can name have been supposedly heard. And a few years ago, in the last 15 or 20 years, somebody captured a picture outside the mouth of a cave here, and it looked to be a woman dressed in a white dress. It showed up in the film, but it wasn't in the picture when they took it. Betsy Bell and the Bell children often played in the cave that was on their farm. They claimed at times to have had something chasing them. And so the story of a giant fish just below the cave that stirred up the water and caused the Bell children to be greatly alarmed. On a trip from the river and from the cave one day, Betsy saw a little girl hanging from the tree, and she talked to Betsy and told her that she shouldn't marry her boyfriend, Joshua Gardner. So caves are so important to the legend and the story of the Bell Witch in Robeson County.
I was teaching a local history class for Volunteer State Community College. And the guy that owned the cave, he asked me if I had ever been to the cave, which I had not. And so we go down to the cave, and we go about 250 feet back, and I got up on this ledge with this gentleman to see some Indian drawings or whatever, and the lights go out. And this is 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I have 10 or 11 history students in there. So we grope ourselves back out of the cave, and we get to the entrance of the cave. The lights come back on. Now, my son, who was, let's say, 79, so say about 6 or 7 years old, I wouldn't let him go. So I made him stay with the lady upstairs. So I assumed that she had done something with the lights. He said she didn't move.
Pioneer and farmer John Bell is buried here in the Bellwood Cemetery, along with many of his descendants. The place is popular with tourists who come to find out more about the family tormented over nearly 2 centuries by the Bell Witch. But John Bell's tombstone seen here isn't original. Following an old custom at the time of his death, he would have been buried in the forest. Eventually, many of those early grave sites disappeared.
I was going to try to document where people lived at the time because so much of it is destroyed. Was trying to find one person, the grave. His name was Frank Miles, and in the story, he plays a part as being a neighbor, and he and John Bell Jr. were close personal friends. I walked the countryside trying to find the gravesite. Couldn't do it. One morning, about 3 o'clock, it was in July, I woke up, I'd had a dream. And I dreamed about a small grove of trees. And I couldn't get that away from my mind. I kept going right back to it. And about the middle of the morning, I thought, I know where that is. So I went in this place, and it's grown over with poison ivy and honeysuckle. So I cut all the vegetation away and scraped the dirt off of it, and I had on a glove, and so I rubbed it off, and it said Frank R. Miles. I gently put it back down, covered it back over, and left. I thought, this is not normal. At that point, I thought, you know, some things are better left alone, so just leave it alone. So I stopped my pursuit of locating where anyone else was buried.
I was coming home one night, and me and my kids, and there was this, I don't know what it was. I can't tell you. It wasn't a cat, it wasn't a panther, it wasn't a dog. But I was driving, and this animal come toward my car, and it was pure black and had red eyes. That's all I can tell you. Don't know what it was. I'd never seen anything like it before. And it just kind of come toward me and then darted off, and I never saw nothing of it.
Our phone rang, and it was my grandmother, who was really distraught, and she talked to my father, and she wanted him to come down as soon as possible. We went into the house, and I remember grandmother still holding the phone and seeing how scared she was. She said, well, I was upstairs taking a nap, and I heard this crash, this loud noise, and I came downstairs and then came to the kitchen, and I looked on the floor, and all my china was on the kitchen floor. Well, the odd part about it was there's a butler's pantry between the kitchen and the dining room that had the china cabinet built into the wall with latching doors. And the doors came open, and all the china, every single piece, came out and crashed on the floor, not in the butler's pantry, but in the kitchen. And I just remember seeing it spread just evenly, like it was just thrown out on the floor. And not one piece was broken, and it was bone china. So I have no explanation of how that happened or why it happened, but it was still unexplained by anybody today.
that anybody who goes up there looking for the Bell Witch will find the Bell Witch. In the final chapters of Pat Fitzhugh's book, he talks about his visit out to the graveyard where some of the family had been buried, and he talks about having this feeling of a presence out there, out at the graveyard. He's not the only one. There is also some kids that had gone out there and had found the gravestone of John Bell, and they were bringing the dang-gone thing back in their car, and they had an accident out on the main road, and they died in that accident. Again, the story is it was the witch that was that went after them.
The legend of the Bell Witch has been detailed in some 20 books. It's the most extensively studied case of a haunted house in American history. One of the better-known works was written in 1894 by Martin Ingram, a Tennessee journalist.
And about 3 years before he wrote the book, in the Nashville Banner, he did write a letter that anybody that knew anything on the subject of the Bell family or the Bell Witch to write him letters and testimonies. And he went around the entire countryside in Montgomery, Robertson, and Adams, all through that area, and got a lot of information and testimonies on people that had heard about the legend or actually even knew the Bells.
The story that Ingram tells is he got a copy of the diary that was written by Richard Bell, who is Elizabeth Bell's younger brother. At the time that this event had occurred in Adams, Tennessee, Richard was about 6 to 7 years old. Richard then, 20 years later, sits down and decides he wants to write a diary. So he writes a diary, and he titled it My Family's Troubles. He gives his diary to his son. His son then, about 20 years later, brings this diary to Marvin Ingram with the stipulation that they could do nothing with the diary until all the family had died off. All the first-generation family had died off.
The closest to the legend is in Ingram's book, because he interviewed people within the same era who were related to people who used to live in the time when the actual legend took place.
A lot of folks really kind of consider the first book by Ingram kind of the Bell Witch Bible, if you will, and I don't know why. I know the Ingram book is older. Perhaps that's why. Ingram was a very good writer. He was a newspaper publisher, and he wrote in the style of his day, which was the 1890s. Sometimes a little bit prejudiced, but in general, he's a very good writer.
Okay, and the book is basically filled on stories that happened to the Bell family, that they started hearing strange noises, and they started seeing strange animals, and John Bell would shoot at them, and nothing would happen, or they would run off. And it talks about John Bell later on being killed by the witch.
Several other books follow and help feed the growing legend. Newer reports of alleged witch sightings and other eyewitness accounts win over more believers. Then, a few members of the Bell family come up with a new theory about the hauntings. In a book published in 1934, Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, John's grandson, says that his grandfather came to Tennessee from North Carolina under a cloud of suspicion.
People like the Bell family who were farmers, they began to move into this area because of the land and the fertilization of the land. We're almost certain that they did raise tobacco. There was a church that was established in North Carolina, and it moved here, and primarily all the people that was in that church came here with the church.
And John Bell was a member of Red River Baptist Church, and he was excommunicated, which I didn't know the Baptists did, but he was, and he was kicked out of the church for a term called usury.
John Bell is a wealthy man, but how he comes by his fortune and conducts his business affairs raises a lot of eyebrows in Robertson County.
They were a prominent family in North Carolina when they moved in here. I've often wondered why did John Bell, I think at the age of 56. If you were successful back there and had a going farm or plantation, why would you leave and move in here and start fresh again?
And there's several stories on basically what he did or what he was accused of, is that some say it was for sale of a horse, sale of land, sale of a slave, or something like this.
He bought it from the Batts family, and Kate felt she was cheated in the purchase.
Kate felt cheated by the Bells, and that she played a role in the actual experience of the Bell Witch. The Bell Witch actually uses a voice, which not all ghosts do, and she refers to herself as Kate. And so that takes you back to Kate Batts.
And we're not really for certain if Kate Batts was the witch or not. You know, that the witch says that she was. And basically, this book right here was written by Ingram. And but we don't know if he ever got to interview any of the Batts family or any of that.
The ghost could be Kate. It could be Kate because this is the person that had an antagonistic relationship with John Bell. A lot of people think that it is Kate because the ghost would use the voice, and whenever she would speak, she would refer to herself as Kate.
Although there is nothing to indicate that that happened. In fact, oftentimes they say that Kate Batts was the witch. The only trouble is Kate Batts was alive at the time, so it's not likely that she had anything to do with it. And the other thing I found in research is she didn't really hold a grudge anyway.
It's a good question. How Kate fit into it all, since, as you pointed out, she wasn't dead when these manifestations started happening. There's no evidence that she cursed him, that she felt cheated by him. That was, at best, a distant relative of hers. So I think this is just probably pretty typical for the way legends develop.
Back then, I think superstition probably played a very important role, is that in the early escorts of man or escapades of man, is that if you can't explain it, it must be something we've done to upset God. So therefore, we won't do that anymore if we can find out what it was we didn't do to begin with. So therefore, this is how they explain many of the actions was through superstition.
The dramatic story of the Bell Witch is made to order for actors. Every year in the fall, some of Tennessee's best performers come together to recount the horrific legend of the most famous haunted house in America. Thrills and chills guaranteed.
And for the play, it's wonderful. We have local artists there. We have a lot of talent is in this neighborhood, a lot of talent.
I hear in 2006, there was about 1,000 in attendance to that play, which runs 2 or 3 weekends in a row. And this past year, in 2012, there was 1,600 who visited, so it's really increased. They changed the story up from year to year. They have different characters in it, different cast members, and they'll try to focus on different aspects of the legend.
And usually involves at least some of the Bell family, and occasionally they'll have a Batts family related to the Batts in the play.
But it's so good. They're so professional. We've had people come there from, like, maybe New York. They say, you know, the plays there are not any better than our plays here.
Well, curiosity seekers will come, and they will experience the Bell Witch by going to the play's spirit. And whenever they go out there to Adams and watch the play, sometimes they'll have things happen to them that they will attribute to the Bell Witch. And that's why they come here in the first place a lot of times, because people are fascinated with this story. And the fact that it has gone through the years and lasted as long as it has is just fascinating to people. And when they do come and they do experience the play and then maybe visit some of the sites, they might have some things happen to them that they might think is from the paranormal. And whether it's the paranormal, who's to say?
The Bell Witch legend keeps the town of Adams on the map. Recent phenomena still have people believing, and so the legend lives on.
When I came, being an outsider, I was a non-believer.
They're little vaporous orbs that can be seen.
They couldn't see it was a person. They just could see some movement and a little light.
But I've only been in the cave one time, that night that the lights went out.
And there's this lady that came, and she was going to do a seance.
I have no desire to go back in it. And yes, true, I am a believer.
We have not seen them, but we have been told by two different people. One who was up here, who had never been here before, and said, well, I saw this little cloud going from the cemetery to the second floor of your house. And we also ran into another man who grew up on this road as a child and said he was never so scared in his life and saw the same thing.
What should one make of those wispy clouds often spotted in this part of Tennessee? Fog is relatively common in the region. Great Smoky Mountains National Park is just a 5-hour drive from Adams. The park gets its name from the fog that often drifts down from the high mountains. It's home to bears and deer, but no recorded sightings of a ghost or even the Bell Witch. So why do people claim strange things are still happening in Tennessee?
Like many legends and ghost stories, they tend to morph over time, especially if people have an incentive. And I'm not going to talk about I'm not going to make any allegations, but there's money to be made here.
Marvin Ingram started a newspaper in Springfield, Tennessee, and then moved his newspaper up to Clarksville. And the two of them ran the paper. Thomas was the reporter, and Ingram was the promoter. They had gotten into, at that time, a kind of the liars group. And the whole thing was who could tell the most fantastic story.
Well, you can never discount lying. People lie for a lot of reasons, and some people like attention, some people want to believe. So there's always that.
When Marvin Ingram wrote his book, on the back part of his book, he's got a list of all the people he talked to and interviewed for this book.
You have to go back to where do we even know about this story? We know about the story from Ingram.
He talked to nobody who had ever been involved directly with the Bell Witch. He talked only to people who knew people who were involved.
In my opinion, it could have been nothing. In my opinion, that story could have totally been made up.
He never talked with Elizabeth. He never talked with any of the family, and never even talked with the boy, Richard Bell, who wrote the diary.
They refused to part with the diary until Betsy was dead. And I thought to myself, that's really slick, because now with Betsy out of the picture and they give the diary, she's not there to interview, to verify, not verify. So, but again, we go back to this assumes the diary even existed.
Nobody has even seen the diaries.
There's no reason to believe Ingram couldn't have made everything up other than the fact that these people did exist. The Bell family did exist.
It is reported by Marvin Ingram that Andrew Jackson visited the site. Now, Andrew Jackson visited after he had just done the New Orleans, conquest down there, where he defeated the British in New Orleans.
Well, the story about him coming into town and his wagon not moving and on, whenever that was reported to have happened, I mean, he was president. People knew where he was, and he wasn't there.
Anything that man would have done would have been written down in great detail. Okay, I have searched his journals. Others have searched his journals. There's absolutely no mention whatsoever in his journals of ever having been to Adams, Tennessee, not without alone having confronted the witch.
I mean, the way this legend has developed, it's got a little bit of everything. They've thrown in poltergeist stuff, they've thrown in witch stuff, ghost stuff, bad witch, good witch. There's religion thrown in. So that's a good way to get people to believe. Put something in there that they can relate to, and they might ignore the rest, but they'll believe the legend if it has something that speaks to them.
kids all around Robertson County and Middle Tennessee hear about the Bell Witch as they grow up. And not only do they hear it from family and friends when they're younger, but when they do enter the school system, sometimes it will be interjected into their curriculum.
What I would do is I would write something on a piece of paper, as inane as it is or something like this, and the rule of the game is that the first person in this class row read it and tried to memorize it. And then I took the piece of paper, and then the rules of the game is you turn around and you tell the person behind you exactly what you read. And that went all the way around the room until the last person. Now, that last person's job was to come up and write on the board exactly what they heard. It never, ever started out or ended up the same. So therefore, I said, okay, now we have established the rules for telling the Bell Witch stories.
Well, found footage is a well-known technique in fiction. It's used in literature. It's used a lot in sci-fi. But the way things are set up is someone stumbles upon a relic, photos, diary, film, whatever, that depicts something that supposedly happened. We all know about the Blair Witch Project. You know, they found these videos of allegedly what happened in the woods. We know the Blair Witch Project is fiction. But what we've got here is the diary is kind of the found footage. Of course, they didn't have videos back then. So we've got Ingram, who allegedly has this source that isn't even that good, but that's another topic. But unlike the Blair Witch Project, he doesn't even have the diary.
Everyone has heard of a ghost, a haunted house, or a paranormal event at least once in their lives. Most of us either accept or reject the reports based on the evidence. In the case of the Bell Witch, no one can say for sure what actually happened 200 years ago near the quiet village in Tennessee, or why sightings continue to this day. A few people have theories.
Bo was in the Bell Witch Cave, which sometimes it's open to the public and sometimes it isn't. And sometimes around Halloween, they used to say that they would have people to come and they'd have things happening, you know, to excite people. So one time, Bo was there. He's a friend of the owner, and he was there taking some pictures back in the cave. And there's this lady that came, and she was going to do a seance with a couple of photographers and everything. And she saw Bo in the background, but she didn't see he was a person. She thought that was the Bell Witch coming there while they were in there. Bo stood back and laughed because he knew that he didn't want to tell them that it was just him. He didn't want to burst their bubble.
One night I was staying with my grandmother. I was very young, 4 at most. And in my mind, I woke up and just felt like I had to go downstairs in the middle of the night. And when I went downstairs, I saw a ghost behind the stove. And even as a young child, I didn't think it was a ghost. It just didn't even make sense to me. I thought, well, that's the boy across the street. He snuck into the house and he's trying to scare me. So I started crying and ran up and got my grandmother, and she came down, and of course the ghost wasn't there anymore. And I remember having my head in her lap, crying, and her soothing me and telling me it was just a nightmare. And then the way I remember it, we went back upstairs and I laid in bed and I couldn't help but keep thinking about it. And I went down again and it was there again. Now, why did that happen? I think it was a nightmare, maybe sleepwalking, lucid dreaming. But my grandmother and I would talk about it over the years, and I'd say, remember when I saw the ghost? And she said, Karen, it was just a nightmare. But in my mind, and today, even today, it was so real. And that's why people believe in these things.
Visitors come to Adams, Tennessee from all over the world to learn about the Bell Witch. Even if they never spot an evil specter lurking in every corner of this quaint frontier town, they're bound to fall under the spell of its charm.
When you come to Adams, there's a lot to see and do for a small town. Our motto is year-round country fun, and there are good places to eat. There's Adams Station Barbecue, which has excellent barbecue and home cooking, and the Moss's restaurant has great steaks and burgers. And
it used to be the schoolhouse cafeteria, is what it was. It is also known as the Bell Witch Cafeteria at one time. Now, we've had a few little incidents happen out here, knocks and, stuff like that. We got a little thing up there we stub our tickets on. It come flying across the room, and nobody was near it. But, we just told her, Kate, go away, we're busy, we don't have time to fool with you, so,
And then Red River Canoe is a little bit further down the road on Highway 41, and that provides camping experience and canoeing, and they have a lot of festivals throughout the year. But the Bell School Grounds has a lot of festivals year-round as well. We have the Thresherman Show in July, and that's been going on for about 43 years now, every year. And they have gentlemen that have an old-fashioned wheat thresher and a sawmill, a blacksmith shop, and other antique tractors that actually perform the craft there. They also have tractor pulls and other activities, but it's neat to see the way these craftsmen operate, back then. We also have the Bell Witch Bluegrass Competition in September. Square dancing and bluegrass music and picking and grinning all over the grounds. And we end the year with the Spirit Play in October during Halloween, which tells the story of the Bell family and the Bell Witch.
It is a very much attended tourist attraction, and I sold tickets to people from Australia, Sweden, Germany, the Ukraine, and they came. And how they heard about it, I did not know. I knew it was a local phenomenon, maybe even a national, but an international. I had no idea.
The legend is very popular. It's been around for 196 years, and people come from thousands of miles, even fly from overseas, to learn about the bells.
In Robertson County in Adams, we have the Bell Witch Cave, and we have the old farmland of John Bell Sr., and we have a Bell Cemetery and an old Bell School.
We're going to visit the Bell Willett City of Adams Museum. We're going to visit the Bell Cabin, which is owned by the museum itself, at least part of the original Bell House.
The building behind me is the last standing structure from the original Bell Farm. It was a cabin that was some dated to be built around 1820, and this was the time of the haunting that was going on, and this cabin was moved here on the grounds of Bell School in the early 1980s, and this cabin basically was used by sharecroppers up until the 1970s. So it has quite a history unto itself.
This is the place you would come to find out more about the Bell family and their spirit. On the wall, we have items that related to Adams, and especially back here in the corner, we have a picture of John Bell Jr. up high and some of the documents associated with his life. We have at least one document here telling us what he had given his oldest daughter when she got married. $110 for a horse and saddle, $500 for a slave named Mary. The slaves, of course, at the Civil War, were freed, but as they became adults, they were probably worth anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000. We have some stuff in the middle that related to his father, and of course the drawing of his sister Betsy. She seemed to be even nervous in her older age. One of her great-great-granddaughters stated that she would never sleep alone. always had a grandchild or somebody with her, and she would always sleep against the wall and let the child or whoever was with her sleep on the outside of the bed.
Adams, Tennessee takes its name from the local train station built in 1859. Ever since, the town has been a popular stop for anyone with a taste for adventure. Signs of its colonial past can still be found everywhere. The riches of the cotton plantations is what attracted families like John Bell's. But it's the infamous Bell Witch who continues to draw the crowds.
Well, even before the movie became famous, it was the stories, the folklore stories. Anytime a folklore booklet comes out or a new production comes out, whether it's a movie or a TV show, people will flock to Adams. They'll come to Robertson County to see if they can be a part of the Bell Witch experience. A lot of them are curious if she actually exists, and they will roam around the town and visit City Hall and find directions to some of the places that are prominent in the legend, and they will try to experience it for themselves.
I moved here in 1969, and basically I love the rural setting. That's where I basically came from, and that although the area has grown, we try to keep our rural setting, and we will fight. I will fight basically any attempts to modernize it any more than it is.
Well, we have a great little town here, and it's a lot like Mayberry. It's a small town feel, and the people that are in leadership in the past had a lot of foresight in the way they planned things and tried to bring people here. And so now it's one of the biggest tourism draws in the county.
I think there are things that happened. And I think it's at one time, something happened a long time ago that caused the spirit to be written. It became a legend, and it was told more and more and more. And as the legend grows, it gets bigger and better. More people wants to know about it. And it's something that did happen, but of course it was so long ago we can't explain it.
Weird things happen in Adams all the time, but especially during the Play and Spirit Week, the last 2 weekends of October. Come on down. You never know what you might encounter.
Whenever people experience the Bell Witch and they come here, they want to be a part of it. And so they'll either drive by the cave or they'll drive by the school or the cemetery, and they may have car problems afterwards. Now, whether those car problems are from neglect or from the Bell Witch is to be seen, but a lot of them would like to attribute things happening to them and experiences happening to them because of the Bell Witch presence in Robertson County.
Klagenfurt is the capital city of Carinthia, the southernmost state in Austria. The city is located in the scenic foothills of the Alps. Klagenfurt has about 100,000 inhabitants and sits in a valley surrounded by 3,200-foot or 1,000-meter high mountains. The peaks are so tall that snow covers them well into June. Whether it's a day at the beach, a boat ride, an outdoor concert, or sipping a cold drink on a sunny terrace, there's something here for everyone. But there's a dark side to these lively attractions. Something sinister may inhabit these waters and mountains. Tradition alleges that a terrifying creature hunts here, one that attacks and eats humans.
The body shape is long, stretched, it's round. The head is similar to a dog.
What you also can see is that it has very small eyes and a large nose. So it was very aggressive because it couldn't see well.
It always attacks here, and it jumps through the air, say, up to 15 feet or more.
With short legs and short wings and a frightening face and teeth.
It looks like a dragon. He can also fly. You have to be very careful, especially when he is hungry.
It's so poisonous that even its breath can kill.
Yeah, once it blew out fire, it destroyed our city.
So if you are being attacked, you better run.
The creature everyone's talking about has been spotted hundreds of times. Their stories vary. Some describe it as a large lizard or snake. For others, it's a dragon or a hybrid of all three. Some say it has 2 legs, others 4. Still, others claim it has 100, like a centipede. Eyewitnesses believe its skin and tail resemble a crocodile's. Whatever it is, every school kid in Klagenfurt learns about it. Girls especially fear it because many of its victims have been female. Locals have several names for this monster, but most call it the Tatzelwurm.
I really believe that people who see strange things and strange creatures do see what they see. So people who see a strange kind of reptile or who believe they've seen a strange kind of reptile would have reported until the 1930s that they have seen a Tatzelwurm, where there were regular news reports about sightings of Tatzelwurms and where scientific magazines asked their readers to send in their sightings of Tatzelwurms for analysis for zoologists. The idea that there are large reptiles of serpentine or lizard form exists all over Europe. And you have one general term that is dragon, which comes from the Greek word draco, which means serpent. The Germanic word for that is Lindwurm, or snake, actually translated. And wherever you go in Germany or in the German-speaking parts of Europe, you have different names for dragon, and one of these is Tatzelwurm.
The belief in fire-breathing dragons was common throughout the Alpine regions of Europe during the Middle Ages. Frightening tales emerged as families went about their everyday lives in these secluded and unexplored mountainous areas. Even today, some people still believe there is some truth in these old stories.
Imagine in former times, not only in the Middle Age, but also lasting until the end of the 19th century. Nature at that time was still something dangerous, something very strange, which is something against human beings. But nevertheless, people had to walk from one place to the other, wandering from one valley to the other, crossing mountains. And in such ways, lonely, wandering, I could imagine that they get in contact suddenly with such a creature.
And the most interesting case for me was in 1899, when an official forester in Austria reported that he had been attacked by a Tatzelwurm in a very smooth fur coat.
This particular encounter with a Tatzelwurm is especially chilling. Records indicate this hairy creature spit poison at its victims. Fortunately, the forester shot it dead. Nothing more is known. There are more recent eyewitness accounts to add to the legend. One day, a farmer discovered a skull in one of his fields. The skull is now on display at the Klagenfurt Regional Museum. Could it be the actual skull of a Tatzelwurm? When alive, was this the head of the monster that terrorized so many people? Are these the eyes that stalked its victims? Cryptozoologists investigate undiscovered animals that have eluded the science of traditional zoology. Creatures like the yeti, sea serpents, and giant squid are just some of the legendary species cryptozoologists research in an attempt to prove whether or not they exist.
Since my early childhood, I have been interested in cryptozoology, which is a Greek word meaning the signs of hidden animals still undiscovered by zoology. And while most cryptozoologists are interested in whether these animals are real or not, or try to hunt them, I'm more interested in the sociological and folkloric implications of these reports. Well, all over Europe you find the myth that there were dragons in earlier times, and there are many terms and names for these dragons. In Germany, the dragon was often called Lindwurm, which is an old German word. Lind means serpent, and Wurm means serpent too, so it's Lindwurm actually translates as snake. In the Alpine region, the Lindwurm was often called Tatzelwurm, which is one of many local names. Others are Stollenwurm, Haselwurm, Murbel, Bergstutz, or in Italy, Basilisk.
With hundreds of eyewitness reports, it's hard to determine what's real and what isn't. In 1860, a cross between a Tatzelwurm and a sea serpent was spotted in Lake Mondsee in Austria. More recently, in the 1980s, a farmer claims to have seen a Tatzelwurm near Carlton in Italy's South Tyrol province. He ran over it and crushed it with his tractor. And the evidence is still mounting. In recent years, more sightings have occurred in Austria's Enns Valley.
Sightings of the Tatzelwurms, that is, people who actually claim to have seen a dragon-like creature in the mountains, spreads all over the Alps, from Nice in France over to Italy, around the large Italian lakes, to all over Switzerland, Austria, parts of Germany, in Bavaria. And it also goes down to Yugoslavia, where there are again local variants.
Thousands of years ago, the region around Klagenfurt was carved out by glaciers into deep valleys. Swamps and marshes were left behind by the melting ice and runoff from snow-capped mountains. Large animals grazed in the Alpine meadows. Many of these creatures were very different from the ones we know today. Early humans lived in these areas too, and came into contact with the prehistoric animals. They may even have had close encounters with the Tatzelwurm.
The people didn't live in the Klagenfurt Basin 1,000 years ago. They lived up the hills. So in the Basin, you could have seen the Lindwurm.
Generally, people tend to think that the Tatzelwurm is an animal that lives in the rocks above the tree line. But from all the stories that I have assembled, almost half of the stories refer to a Tatzelwurm near or in water. There are practically no sightings of Tatzelwurms in the forest. So generally, where people expect to see Tatzelwurms or where people see Tatzelwurms is where people would say normal lizards as well. As much as Germany became deforested and settled, the more the dragon was pushed to the geographical margins of the region, and that were the lakes on the one hand and the high mountains on the other. The most recent sightings of Tatzelwurm-like creatures have been in the area of the big Italian lakes, that is around Lake Como, Lake Garda, and Lake Maggiore, and in southern Tyrol, in the Adige Valley, and in the Veneto, which is the province of Venice in Italy, the Alpine parts of that province, and in Austria in the Enns Valley. So if someone is looking for actual living Tatzelwurms, he should concentrate his search there.
More than 500 reports of large lizard-like creatures have come from an area of several hundred square miles around Klagenfurt. It's not clear if people are seeing the Tatzelwurm because no one can agree on what the beast actually looks like. So the creature remains largely a folktale, somewhere between superstition and unproven scientific fact. Is this creature still crawling around these regions? The most impressive evidence is this giant skull found near Klagenfurt 700 years ago.
The skull of the Lindwurm was found in the 14th century near Klagenfurt at St. Michael's at the Zollfeld, at the so-called dragon pit. In the 13th century, the city seal of Klagenfurt already showed a winged dragon, the Lindwurm.
The discovery of a Tatzelwurm skull caused the legend and fear to spread throughout the Alps. Seeing the monster's image immortalized in Klagenfurt's town emblem reinforces local belief that the terrible beast that once devoured its residents may still be on the prowl for more. Finding Tatzelwurms is a daunting challenge. During the Middle Ages, people claimed the creatures lived in marshes. Today, some people believe they inhabit the shores of local lakes. Others think it's the Alpine forests that offer the best chance for a close encounter. Wherever it lives, most witnesses agree the Tatzelwurm is a huge reptile, either a large lizard or a giant snake. Because such a creature is within the realm of possibility, some people still believe it exists.
Tatzelwurm is a German word which translates into English as a snake with legs, which generally gives you a good idea about how a Tatzelwurm is supposed to look like. People who see them have told of many different kinds, but generally it's either a large lizard, like an iguana, or a snake. And there have been reports of Tatzelwurms with no legs, so complete snakes, or only front legs, or only hind legs, or even with a row of legs like a centipede. The Tatzelwurm has often generally resembles a lizard, but with a stumpy tail, so like the tail being cut off. The skin is like that of a lizard or a newt, but there are many Tatzelwurm sightings who say the Tatzelwurm that I've seen had hair. Generally, in modern reports, which are more credibly in zoological terms, the head is said to resemble that of a newt or a snake or a lizard. But about 200 years ago, the Tatzelwurm was always, when people reported Tatzelwurms, they said it had the head of a mammal. So like mainly a cat's head, or a goat's head, or a dog's head, or even a child's head.
Legends dating back to the Middle Ages describe Tatzelwurms attacking cows for their milk and eating young girls before slinking back into the impenetrable swamps.
The story is that the Lindwurm lived in Klagenfurt, and the people lived outside of Klagenfurt because they were afraid of the Lindwurm.
And the Tatzelwurm was living in this area. So especially the women, they had a lot of fear.
When we were younger, when we heard the story, we were a little bit afraid of the Lindwurm.
Because when he was hungry, he has also eaten sometimes one of the nice girls.
I thought that the Lindwurm can bite me and eat me.
And then the men are coming from the small villages around.
And one day, the Prince of Klagenfurt built a tower where young knights could fight against the Lindwurm.
And one of the farmers, he had a beef, a strong beef, and they put something in his mouth, like when you go fish.
Man hat einen Stier angekettet und in diesem Stier einen Widerhaken angebracht Und auf den Lindwurm hat man dann gewartet. Der Stier hat sehr laut geschrien und durch das Schreien des Stieres ist der Lindwurm angelockt worden und hat sich auf den Stier gestürzt und ihn natürlich versucht zu fressen. Und dabei hat er sich in den Widerhaken verfangen. Und je tiefer er sozusagen das Tier in seinen Rachen verschlingen wollte, umso stärker hat er sich in den Widerhaken hineingebissen. Kurzum, am Ende ist eben der Lindwurm auf diese Art und Weise getötet worden. Und die jungen Männer sind seitens des Landesfürsten auch in der Art und Weise reich beschenkt worden, dass man gesagt hat, hier wird auch die Stadt Klagenfurt gegründet.
Is the Tatzelwurm a surviving remnant of some extinct species that once inhabited the Austrian Alps? Or perhaps it's an undiscovered and unclassified new species that has managed so far to escape capture?
I did not only read books and newspapers and collect stuff about these monsters, but I also traveled to many areas where monsters have been seen, also where Tatzelwurms have been seen. And I spent some summer holidays in Upper Italy, where around the Italian lakes, Tatzelwurms have been reported well until 5 years ago, and went through the mountains. But while I found old reports, I was never actually able to photograph one myself. One of the most interesting things that I've noticed is, in contrast to, say, sea serpents or lake monsters, a large percentage of the reports refer to dead animals. That is, about 60 out of 500 reports refer to the finding of a skeleton or actually the killing of a Tatzelwurm. But the most recent that I investigated was the case of a Tatzelwurm that was killed in the 1980s at Kaltern in South Tyrol, where a farmer found a Tatzelwurm that was dead, and because he had run over it on his tractor. And this was collected and later analyzed by zoologists and was found to be a Sheltopusik. That's a legless lizard that lives in the Balkans, in what was then Yugoslavia. It was very close to a railway line, so it was suspected that this Balkan lizard, which looks like a snake, very strange creature and large, did crawl on a railway wagon in the Balkans and then went out when the train stopped at St. Joseph in Kaltern, and therefore was killed there.
The Alps have been thoroughly explored and mapped, and an inventory of every living species found there reveals nothing resembling a Tatzelwurm. Yet, reports of sightings extend over 900 years. In spite of logical explanations about what it could be, the legend of the Tatzelwurm lives on.
Die Geschichte des Lindwurms ist natürlich eine sehr lange Geschichte und reicht bis in das Mittelalter, bis in das sogenannte finstere Mittelalter zurück, späten 12. Jahrhundert, als uns der Lindwurm in einem Stadtsiegel zum ersten Mal begegnet, war natürlich der Volksglaube, der Aberglaube und damit auch der Glaube an diesem Lindwurm sicherlich in großen Teilen der Bevölkerung noch vorhanden, weil es auch durchaus dem damaligen Zeitgeist entsprochen hat.
Nowadays, with the tendency of many people to keep exotic animals which escape or which are released into the wild, certainly there is more chance that real animals might be behind some of the sightings. But generally, I do think that it's still a question of perception. Around the year 1800, you have 3-meter Tatzelwurms as a rule. In 1930, you have 1-foot Tatzelwurms as a rule. And I think this is a very strong confirmation of the idea that as long as the Alps as a habitat were practically untouched by man, he could imagine large creatures living there, like in foreign countries. as much as the mountains were explored by mountaineers, by tourists, the idea of a 3-meter dragon living around, say, Lake Como became incredible. So people tended to see smaller animals.
Because the Tatzelwurm raises so many questions and contradictions, skeptics have a field day with it. One of them is Dr. Michael Martis, director of Austria's Alpine Zoo in Innsbruck. Innsbruck twice hosted the Winter Olympics, in 1964 and again in 1976. Martis knows all about the alpine animals and their behavior. And he has a theory about what the Tatzelwurm might be.
The name Alpine Zoo is the theme we decided to show to our public. With about 150 species and more than 2,000 individuals, we display on our grounds the largest collection of the alpine fauna in the world. Well, as far as I'm a natural scientist and especially interested in animal behavior, I believe in what I see and what I know. The story of Tatzelwurm is interesting, but for me it's a myth, it's a legend, and I could imagine that we have a very basic biological counterpart to the Tatzelwurm, which is the river otter. The river otter is living mainly, as the name says, on rivers, on streams, on ponds. He's more or less nocturnal or active during the darkness. And its behavior gives me the impression that it is the realistic figure of the Tatzelwurm. The river otter is raising his body to have an overview. He's screaming if it's something scaring him. It is also hissing if it's in fear. And when swimming, it is diving. And if during the courtship behavior, a male is following the female, it gives the impression of a snake. And so altogether, this behavior of the river otter could be a very good picture for the idea of a Tatzelwurm.
For Martis's theory to hold any water, hundreds of eyewitnesses over 9 centuries would have had to mistake the Tatzelwurm for a common river otter. But even the most rabid skeptic has a hard time explaining why so many people confused a giant reptile with a small mammal. Martis believes there's an obvious answer.
People from rural countries, they were wandering, crossing mountains, or sometimes very isolated, alone, in the night, in the darkness. And at that time, even in the 19th century, nature was something strange, dangerous. It was something to be scared of. And river otter actually is not only living in rivers, or in water, but is also wandering from one valley to the other, so crossing mountains. It could be happen that a river otter is crossing the way of a wandering man. Well, you know, if you look at a river otter, he could bite you if he's scared, if he's in a corner and cannot escape. He will attack you. He will bite you. He will scream. So this animal, I think, shows a lot of items which are belonging to the so-called Tatzelwurm.
And the most interesting case for me was in 1899, when an official forester in Austria reported that he had been attacked by a Tatzelwurm in a very smooth fur coat. The Tatzelwurm had fur, and it was spitting poison at him, and he hit it and killed it. And when later scientists came to recover, it was the antler of a deer. So practically everything could be turned into a Tatzelwurm if the fear or the idea that this animal existed was believed to be real. Anything could turn into a Tatzelwurm.
Fear and superstition explain away most of the stories about the Tatzelwurm. Yet some believe the monster might actually have existed back in the Middle Ages, then disappeared. Their hard evidence is this large skull discovered in the 14th century and now on exhibit at the Klagenfurt Regional Museum.
500 years ago, each bones and skulls the people found, they thought that it is related to dragons or to mythical creatures.
So what we see here is the skull of the so-called lindworm, which is of course not a mystical creature, but it's from the Ice Age and it's a woolly rhino. So in that time when they found the creature, they thought it would be something else because they don't know about dinosaurs and fossils. But after that, in the year 1840, a paleontologist came to the city of Klagenfurt and saw the skull. And then he found out that it's the woolly rhino from the last Ice Age. So it's about 30,000 years old, maybe a little older, but we think about 30,000 years. And what you can see clearly here at the sides and here also that it's really of bone structure. If you break a bone today, it's the same structure. Also, when you knock at it, you can hear this is no bone anymore. This is silicified. Of course, it doesn't live on the ice shield, but it lived around at the grass areas together with the mammoths, but it was not so frequent. What you also can see is that it has very small eyes and a large nose. And because of this fact, they think the sight was bad, but the smell was good. So it was very aggressive because it couldn't see well. When the people of Klagenfurt found the skull, they saw only the upper part because the lower jaw is missing. So it looks much more like a snake than everything else. Also, it's very large and has no similarities to other animals. Nowadays, as a paleontologist and with our knowledge, we know that this is a rhino. If you're going to Africa and look at the rhinos today, they have, or Sumatra, they are very similar and they are related. So this is no question, this is a rhino and not a lindworm.
As an example as how this process might work, if you visit Loch Ness and see a large dark shadow in the waves, even if you're a skeptic, you would be thinking in terms of the Loch Ness monster. People have preconceived ideas about what they know from the media, and in earlier centuries we have known through folklore about what to expect in terms of monsters. And there's a general tendency for monsters to be at the margin of civilization. That is, dragons were reported in Germany everywhere in the Middle Ages. Nobody had ever seen one, but it was known dragons lived there. And as much as Germany became deforested and settled, the more the dragon was pushed to the geographical margins of the region, and that were the lakes on the one hand and the high mountains on the other. And in the Alps, this idea of the dragon has been able to survive the longest.
I think the people who found the skull in the 14th century really believed the legend of the lindworm, because they didn't know that it was a skull from the Ice Age, of a mammal from the Ice Age. Well, I would say the people of Klagenfurt were disappointed about this fact. at the first time. But anyway, the skull came to the 1849 founded regional Museum of Natural History, and later on to the regional Museum of Carinthia, where you can still see it.
The one piece of evidence that might prove the Tatzelwurm is real turns out to be the skull of a woolly rhinoceros. Paleontologists authenticated it as an extinct animal that roamed the region about 30,000 years ago. In spite of this fact, the people of Klagenfurt are so fond of the dragon legend, they include the mythical Tatzelwurm in their city's emblem. Moreover, the dragon's statue glares down menacingly from a pedestal in Klagenfurt's city square.
Right now we're here in the center of the city of Klagenfurt. We have around 100,000 inhabitants, a bit less. And here we're in the main place. That's the new square, Neuer Platz in German. And behind us we can see the Lindwurm. That's the symbol of our city. We have all a strong connection to the Lindwurm right here. The Lindwurm, yeah, it's not so easy to define what it is. Actually, everybody says it's a dragon, but if you go further on, you will see the face is close to be the one of a lion. Then you can see the ears, it's like a bird, and at the end, the tail is like from a snake.
And it was built in the 16th century. The big statue of Hercules was added in the 17th century.
Tatsache ist, im Jahre 1593 wurde dieser Lindwurm offiziell in die Stadt gebracht und hier am heutigen Neuen Platz aufgestellt, und zwar auf Veranlassung der Stände. Meine Interpretation dieses Ereignisses ist, dass die protestantischen Stände es dem katholischen Landesherrn eben sozusagen zeigen wollten, hier ist unser Machtsymbol. 40 Jahre später etwa wird der Lindwurm dann in die heutige Position gebracht. Das heißt, auf ein Fundament gehoben und herum entsteht dann ein Brunnen, und dann kommt als völlig neues Momentum ein Herkules dazu.
The Tatzelwurm is front and center in Klagenfurt's city square for all to see. Yet the stark presence of a giant stone dragon gushing water through its ferocious teeth can't be dismissed as just another piece of historic art. Today, this ancient statue keeps watch over year-round festivals and assemblies in the square. However, since the sculpture was erected at the end of the Middle Ages, it could also be seen as the visual record of a creature which may have actually lived during that time.
The monument of the Lindwurm at the new place in Klagenfurt is an interesting fact. It's about 6 tons, and it shows the Lindwurm with his open mouth, and out of the mouth there comes a fountain. So this is very artistic. And when you look to the tail, at the twisted tail of the Lindwurm, this is also a sign for high mastership in sculpture. This fountain was also a practical thing. It was used for the water supply in the city. So the whole ensemble is a very characteristic sign of Roman mannerism. It's a very important work of art.
When we are little children, every class go to the Lindwurm and watch it. And we learned the story of the Lindwurm in school. And yes, I think for the citizens in Klagenfurt, it's also an important symbol because it's the symbol of our city.
So the people, they have to choose what they want to see first. But most of them, they are going first to the new square, where we have our Tatzelwurm, and then they decide, we are going for a swim, we are going in a museum, we are going shopping, or let's have a look where we can buy a souvenir with the Tatzelwurm.
So here we're in the tourist information office, and you can see a lot of products connected to the lindworm, to the Tatzelwurm, and you can see the brand is on the t-shirt, so if we go further we can see the legend. It's written in a nice book, and you can see the coat of arms of Klagenfurt with the red background, the white tower. It's like a brand mark, you know? So you can go further on. It's also for kids. You have a book about the dragon. It's described as a dragon in here. Souvenirs or for little kids. It's very nice. Lindworm to take you to your bed to sleep. And for the sportive ones, you have also a hat. Yeah, like that.
There are some holdouts who still believe the Tatzelwurm is waiting to fill its stomach with more victims. But most people are just grateful this mythical beast helps fill Klagenfurt's commercial coffers. The Tatzelwurm's been so good for business, it's become an iconic symbol of the city.
I think it is the combination. The combination is the town, the lake, and the Tatzelwurm. I cannot say that a person is coming to Klagenfurt only to see the Tatzelwurm, and a person is coming to Klagenfurt only to go for a swim in the lake. It is the combination what Klagenfurt offers.
I work in the Hofbräu zum Lindwurm, and we have the Lindwurm in our name because it's a symbol for Klagenfurt, and our restaurant is really near the statue of the Lindwurm. Hofbräu is a restaurant chain where you can eat and drink typical Munich food. And yes, I worked in a Dirndl because it's also typical for Munich.
The Tatzelwurm is so integral to tourism that many shops, restaurants, and pubs find ingenious ways to honor the beast. But having such a celebrated creature can also attract the wrong kind of attention. Occasionally, revelers out on the town try their hand at dragon slaying after killing a few pints.
So actually, the monster can be alive. Because like some months ago, there was a very strange story. There've been some guys, maybe drunk, and yeah, what they did was that they thought the monster was alive, and so they tried to fix it. No, they climbed onto the monster, onto the tail, and the tail broke down. So we had to fix it again. It was a nightmare, more or less, for the Lindworm and for those guys, for sure. So actually, I believe that it's dead, but you know, you're never sure. And being a young girl who was like the main dish of the Lindworm back there, you can never be so sure. And when you're swimming, having a good swim in the lake, and you're going further on, you might touch something, and you're not sure if it might be the Lindworm. So sometimes you can be scared, let's say it like that.
The Tatzelwurm has now morphed from a monster into a moneymaker. Klagenfurt counts on its famous dragon to drag in customers. From cuddly toys to chocolate treats, the Tatzelwurm is now the ultimate in creature comforts.
Many tourists come here to see the Lindworm because it makes Klagenfurt a little bit interesting, because they want to know the story about the Lindworm and want to see it. When I get older and I have kids, I will tell them the story about the Lindworm, but I don't want them to be afraid.
Ich denke, der Lindwurm ist unter den vielen sogenannten Untieren, die es in der Geschichte gegeben hat, die es auch heute noch gibt, doch etwas Einzigartiges.
The Tatzelwurm has also something special, a warm, how do you say, energy.
Well, if you really, really want to see a Tatzelwurm, then I give you the advice. First, drink a schnapps, which is very common here in the Alpine region. Then, when it's late in the night, start walking up the mountains, across some little rivers, and listen. Maybe you hear it, and I bet you will feel scared. And that's the Tatzelwurm.
Despite all my skepticism regarding the Tatzelwurm, you can never, it would be very unwise to actually 100% rule out that there is something like the Tatzelwurm. It's highly unlikely, but who knows? And even if you don't encounter a Tatzelwurm, I'm pretty certain that the scenery on the mountains of Carinthia will be well worth the visit, with or without a Tatzelwurm sighting.
Iceland, a country like no other, emerged in the center of the North Atlantic before it was settled over 1,000 years ago by Norwegian Vikings. Imagine 300,000 people living on a territory as big as France. The island itself has been shaped by volcanic and geothermal forces, active now as ever, making it a site of incomparable majesty. Among this country's natural treasures, Österland, also known as the Eastern region, is a huge valley formed over millennia by glacial erosion and through which the Lagarfljot River meanders, fed directly from Iceland's largest glacier. The central part of the river widens at the city of Eyjólfsstaðir, forming the lake called Logurinn, or Lagarfljot, which at first glance has the appearance of being just another tranquil body of water. However, this large lake with a depth of over 100 meters or 320 feet hides a mystery. For several centuries, a giant worm known as Lagarfljótamurinn was sighted in the lake. Living witnesses number in the dozens. Recently, one of them even managed to capture images of the creature.
Já, maður alltaf trúað að ormurinn væri hérna, Lagarfljótamurinn væri í fljótinu.
They saw something move up and down, humps or something.
People have been seeing these kinds of humps coming up from the lake surface. Well, we have the records of some kind of a monster living in the lake. The first record is from 1345.
Many hundred years ago, the worm was believed to be very dangerous.
I think there's a creature there. There's something alive down there.
I always have a camera in my car when I travel around the lake if I would see something.
I would describe it as something very huge. It's enormous in size. I mean, every child here in the area can tell you the story about the monster.
I think the Lagarfljótamurinn is really big, ugly, and scary.
Einhver hreyfingu þarna í ánni. Þetta svona hlikkaðist til og frá eins og snákur.
Ég var bara að fara til Bjarndísar, bara í heimsókn, því það er langt síðan ég kom hingað og við varum bara að spjalla eitthvað, við vorum eitthvað í símanum og svo sást þetta bara og ég tók þetta upp.
En kannski alvöru. Þannig að svo fyrir við að horfa á þetta og svona getum ekki áttað okkur á því almennilega hvað þetta er. Þannig og
the worm killed by poison or fire people.
Sko, þegar ég sá þetta, þá trúði ég svona meira.
Do you believe in the worm? Yes, absolutely. I believe in it. I know it exists.
The Lagarfljot lives in Lagarfljot, the third largest lake in Iceland, spanning 53 square kilometers or 20 square miles. Filled with sediment from the glacier that feeds it, the lake's gray color and opacity have helped keep this mystery alive.
This lake is, it's deep. It goes down to at least 112 meters. The glacier dug it down in the ice age.
It has a very, very much volume because, well, the surface of the lake, the altitude of the surface of the lake is about 20 meters above sea level. But the bottom of the lake, well, where it is deepest, it is more than 112 meters deep. We have this 80 meters below sea level of the lake, and that is rather unusual in Iceland.
It's not transparent, as many lakes are, because it's glacier water. So I believe there is a creature down there.
And on the bottom of the lake, also because of the glacier river that runs into it, we have a very thick layer of clay, of sediment from the centuries that the glacier rivers have, washed into it.
When glaciers melt in Icelandic mountains, rivers filled with sediment carve a path to the ocean. Most of these rivers are not navigable because of the violence of the current, but there are exceptions like the Lagarfljot. Among the residents who live around the erosion basin, the famous Lagarfljot Lake, everyone knows at least one person who has seen the terrible creature emerge from its surface.
The people that has told me the story of the worm are people I trust very much. My neighbor, Valdemar, he's a very down-to-earth person, and he was working with several other men putting a telephone cable in the lake, and they had a lot of trouble with the worm because he bit the telephone cable.
Það var aldrei neitt vafi á því eftir við sáum hvers konar meðferð kapallinn hefði fengið að sko þarna var eitthvað óhemju sterkt, mikið afl sem gat gert þetta. Kapallinn var, eins og ég sagði, svo sterkur, sérstaklega framleiddur. Þetta kallað armering, þessi styrking utan á kaplanum. Og ekkert venjulegt afl getur gert þetta. Þetta eins og að vefja upp járnkarla að gera þetta. Svoleiðis að við verðum bæði hræddir og hissa þegar við áttuðum á okkur á því hvað við höfðum gert. Ekki neinum vafa það að þarna var sá gamli á ferðinni.
It was totally unexplainable how it could be twisted so much because it was so strong that they thought it was impossible, and the technicians there they just had no explanation of it other than this very good explanation that it had been in contact with the monster. And the monster didn't like this cable to go over its back.
Very young by the standards of Earth's timeline, Iceland emerged from the bottom of the Atlantic some 20 million years ago as the result of volcanic eruptions. Inhabitants live under a constant threat from 130 active volcanoes, which may explain why this state is the least densely populated country in Europe, with only 3 people per square kilometer.
We are here in Iceland, actually in the eastern part of Iceland, or East Iceland as we call it. And this part of Iceland is renowned for a very good weather. Most Icelanders know it for that they want to come here for summer holidays because of the good weather. We are here in the valley of Fljótsdalur, or the Fljótsdalur Valley, and through it runs this river, which is a glacier river coming from all the way from the Vatnajökull glacier. And so that runs here into the river, and the rivers run into the lake Lagarfljot, which is actually a river all the way to the ocean, but, well, a river lake. Well, we have the records of some kind of a monster living in the lake. The first record is from 1345. So it's quite old, and it's mentioned actually in all the annals or the chronicles of Iceland through the centuries. Some sightings every century.
We have very well-written annals through the centuries, and there you can read about the worm that has been seen various places in the lake, and by whom and when and how.
The presence of religious missions allowed Iceland to keep a fairly accurate record of its history. Icelandic annals make explicit mention of the appearance of a monster here and there over the centuries, beginning in 1345.
I was surprised to see how much was written about it. We have a lot of descriptions of old parishes in Iceland that also tell us about the life of the people and the nature. And even there, you have several times stories about the worm.
Mainly, well, people at least tried to connect it with that, okay, if the monster was seen here at the Lake Lagarfljot, people could expect something very dreadful to happen in the nature. Some eruptions, earthquakes, or a very hard winter following. So it was this belief that it occurred only when something dreadful was going to happen. We have a tale about the origin of this monster. This beautiful little tale about the girl and the gold ring.
Or the legend about the Lagarfljótsormur is very, very old, and it's in every folk tale collection you have in Iceland.
Once was a little girl, and her mother gave her a little golden ring.
And she put the gold in a box, and she was told to put a little worm under the gold, and then it would grow.
So she put the worm on the gold, hoping the gold would grow. But the gold didn't grow, just the worm.
It was a giant worm, and she was so afraid, and she threw the box in the lake.
And then it became this monster that attacked farmers and destroyed the harvest for the farmers.
Icelanders asked some Finns to come and help us. They came and they tell that they met this big monster out close to the sea that was like a big seal. And then they met this big skate with this, I think, 9 tails with poison claws. And one of the Finns, he got hurt by this poison claws, so he had to stop. And the name of that place is Finnstaðanes. It means where the Finn stop. So the story lives in the names of the surroundings.
It is said that the Finns, the magicians from North Norway that came here, or from Lapland, that they managed, after a very hard struggle, they managed to chain it down on the head and the tail. So for that reason, you only see the humps coming up.
Well, it has been kept alive because people has been seeing it so often through the centuries.
We have the same descriptions from people that, well, even not have read the tale.
According to legend, an evil worm thrown into the lake slowly grew into a terrifying giant monster. Skuli Gunnarsson is the director of the cultural center of the region. He has dedicated part of his life to preserving the myth of the Lagarfljot and cataloging its appearances from oldest to newest.
This is actually the first map that was made of Iceland, where it is, well, a little bit similar to how it really looks like, with all the fjords and the peninsulas. And so there is, about the Lagarfljot Lake, it's written a kind of a warning that says something like this, that in this lake there is a living creature, a big creature that occurs when some dreadful things are going to happen. A dangerous monster, actually, it says there in the Latin. So it is written there, and it was copied then to other maps of Iceland for centuries.
When walking along the lake, Skuli cannot help but scan the horizon. Many witnesses claim to have seen the monster while they were driving their vehicle. In response, Skuli has installed information signs in areas where the creature has been thought to emerge.
This is actually an information board put up by the Worm Association, and it explains a little bit the story behind the worm, but mainly it's pointing out the places where something peculiar has been seen. And we are just taking out few places where we have the descriptions from written papers, from the annals, from the chronicles of some peculiar sightings. Well, we can for example take the triangle with the letter D. That is a sighting from 1965, when the staff here working in the forestry in the forest, in the Hallandsstaðir forest, they saw the worm, or at least they thought they saw the worm, and they actually went all the way. Well, they saw it there, and they went all the way to here where we are standing now, and there it disappeared. It seemed to be swimming. It seemed to be swimming upstream, and there were coming some humps up. But when they got here, at this place where it is a very good panorama over the lake, it disappeared.
These forest workers were under orders from Sigurdur Blöndal, who led the National Forest Office. His daughter, Sigrun, a historian, has pulled archives from the time period to try to understand what happened.
I think it was in 1962 that my father was looking out of the window where he lived, and suddenly he saw something rise from the lake, and he called my cousin that was there too, and my brother. They saw something move up and down, humps or something, move up and down for 10 minutes, and they all three watched it through the window very clearly. And my father he's a scientific person. He's very pragmatic. He was a forest warden. So it was very clear to him that it was a worm he saw. And he's never denied that. He's always convinced that he saw the worm.
Ég og Bjartistilljó og Ásdís vorum á leiðinni hérna upp eftir frá Eyslum. Og Ásdís var að koma í heimsókn. Þegar ég kem hérna yfir hæðina, hérna fyrir utan, þá sé ég eitthvað á fljótinu og...
Stelpur, sjáu þarna, er þetta Lagarfljótsárvörður þarna?
Segi eitthvað í stelpuna, sjáu þarna Lagarfljótsárvörðurinn?
Ég man man ekki alveg, en sko við vorum allavega á leiðinni heim hingað og við vorum bara eitthvað svona í bílnum á leiðinni hingað og vorum bara að tala saman og eitthvað svoleiðis og svo sáum við þetta. Og við keyrðum svona lengra þangað til að sjá þetta betur.
Þannig að ég hélt að þetta væri bara svona ormur svona eins og lifra eða eitthvað neginn. En þú veist, ég sá ekki beint hvernig þetta var, sko. Það var bara eitthvað svona gusa upp á vatninu þegar ég tók þetta upp hana.
Við erum bara áfram og horfum á þetta og þannig að þær taka upp, eða Ásdís tekur upp þarna símann og tekur myndir af þessu. Þannig að við teljum að við séum Lagarfljotsorminn þannig.
Ég hélt bara strax að það var Lagarfljotsorminn, sko. Nei, ekki fyrir en ég setti þetta á YouTube og bara þegar fólk voru að tala með mig þetta.
Hvað er þetta?
In 2012, a creature that looks like a snake is filmed swimming against the current upstream of the lake, just outside the house of a sheep farmer. With the help of his nephew who explained how to work the camera, this farmer managed to capture some very disturbing images.
And the telephone rings, and it's my uncle telling me that the Lagarfljótsworm is trying to swim ashore. And I think to myself that this is probably just some debris floating in the river. And I just tell him to take pictures of it. And he wants me to help him to take a video of it. That was how he was able to capture video of the thing.
Hringdi í sjónvarpsfréttamanninn og ætlaði að fá hann til að taka mynd af þessu fyrirbæri, en þá var hann í fríi. Og ég átti myndavél en kunni ekki á hana. Og hann kendi mér í gegnum símann á vélina og ég tók mynd af þessu fyrirbæri þarna í ánni sem að ég tel og mun halda mig við að hafi verið ormurinn eða þá afkvæmi ormsins.
They weren't very interested at first. They asked me to send them the video, but they did not put it on the 7 o'clock news in television. They only put it on the web. And a few days later, the editor of the web, roof.is, calls me up and tells me that the web is almost crashing because thousands of Japanese people are watching the video. And so then we realized that maybe this was something big. And then we did a television news story on the video, but the video and the worm was not the main thing. The main thing was the attention that the video had gotten from Japan and also from millions of people that had watched it on YouTube.
In a few days, millions of users from around the world share the link and look at the images captured by the farmer. But even so, some of the locals remain wary.
The first reaction here in the area was, okay, this is some stunt. They've been planting this there in the river and making this look like a monster or something like that. But I knew, of course, that couldn't be the fact. I mean, he wasn't even able to be ready with a camera.
So after the video got so famous online, camera crews and newsrooms from around the world started sending people to Iceland, and at times it was almost crowded here with reporters, and I was constantly answering questions, helping people out, directing people who to talk to. I was busy because of it, and my uncle as well. He was very happy. Suddenly he was world famous, and the farmers from around, they were envious, and he was the talk of the town.
Já, ég tel með góðri samvisku geta trúað á Lagarfljótsorminn. Eftir þetta hefur reyndar alltaf trúað á hann. Ég búinn að sjá orminn, taka mynd af honum. Og því ættu menn ekki geta trúað á orminn. Jafnvel þó menn hafi ekki séð hann. menn trúa nú á Guð. Hafa menn séð hann allir?
A country of legends, Iceland has been the land of elves and trolls since the passage of the Vikings in the Middle Ages. But the Lagarfljot is something else.
The legend of the worm is, I think, more alive in our thoughts than maybe the elves and trolls. You look at the elves and trolls more like a folk tale.
Maybe you know the Icelanders, they believe in elves, they believe in trolls, they believe in hidden people and hidden things, and some people, they see it. And I believe that they see something. If it's only in their heads or if they are really seeing something, I can't tell.
But my father has seen the worm in Lagarfljot, and my brother has seen it. And my neighbor has seen it. So it's you don't. It's hard to deny the legend, the story when people stand before you, in front of you, and tell you that they have seen the worm.
Já, maður hefur alltaf trúað að ormurinn væri hérna, Lagarfljótsormurinn væri í fljótinu. En eftir að sé þetta þá bara rúmar því enn frekar að hann sé þarna. Já, það hefur breytt kannski þannig að samfærist bara frekar.
Ég mér dreymir ekkert þetta. Ég bara hugsa alltaf út í þetta svona, og svo horfi ég oftast svona lengra það sem þetta var svona.
In recent years, several theories have been advanced to explain what the dozens of witnesses believe they saw in the Lagarfljot Lake. Skarfedin Pórsson is a biologist at the University of Iceland. He studies reindeer populations and is intimately familiar with the lake, which he encounters on a daily basis as part of his research. And although he remains skeptical, his camera is never far away.
So when I drive around the lake, I always have the camera because I'm always thinking about seeing something that could be related to Lagarfljot's worm sighting, something like that. But I'm not expecting to see a live creature. Although some people talk about that the creature is somewhere between the real world and the spiritual world. I don't believe that a real creature exists, but I believe that many people, they sense or feel something that they say is a creature. I can't believe it because the creature have to eat, you have to breathe, it have to breathe, and I don't think it's an environment for a creature to do that in this lake. If it's a fish-like creature, it have gills. But if it's something like a reptile, like Nessie in Scotland, Nessie is, people that believe in Nessie believed it was a plesiosaurus, a reptile. But they became extinct 60 million years ago. The oldest rock in Iceland is only about 15 million years old. And the lake is young. So it's difficult to see what kind of creature should live in the lake.
It would seem, therefore, to be impossible for a giant creature to survive in Lagarfljot Lake. But thanks to the high quantity of sediment and glacial debris found in the lake, conducting a proper survey of what exactly is in the water is difficult.
The water running into it is a glacial water, so there's a lot of floating sediment. The lake go down to more than 100 meters, and the sediment is very thick. Up there, it's 100 meters thick, and in the sediment we have vegetation coming from the wood on the sides of the lake.
This vegetation trapped in sediment ferments in the depths of the lake and can release pockets of gas that then rise to the lake's surface.
So maybe we have some small earthquake or something happen, and the bubble goes up, and then they look like a humpback on the water.
gas sometimes comes up from the bottom of the lake like it's erupting. Gas can erupt from the bottom of the lake, so it looks like something is rising from the lake, but it's actually just air and leaves and debris.
If you go back, I think some 400 or 500 years ago, narrow-minded public people, when they see something strange, like in this lake, the worm is not the only creature here. There's a big seal monster out there, and then we have a skate, the fish, with tails, and on the tails we have a poison claws. And I think it's not hard to imagine that maybe a walrus visit this place out there, and some local people that had never heard about walrus saw something with big teeth, and they tell others and so on, and it changed to a monster.
But it's also in our subconsciousness, I would say, because we have, just as in other places where you have some kinds of tales and some mysterious things, you have these taboos, usually. One thing that if you go to a person here in the region and you ask, can I have a trout from the lake? Or you will probably get the answer, no, the trout from this Lagarfljot lake, it's unedible. It's so bad tasting, and so you don't want that. But that is not the fact. I mean, the trout from the lake, the meat of the trout is a little bit lighter because of the color of the lake, but it's not bad fish to eat. And then the other thing is that why are no boats on the lake? Well, you haven't seen any boats on the lake. Then you get the explanation, oh, the waves of the lake, they are extremely sharp. They are much sharper on this lake than any other lake you can find. So you shouldn't go out on a boat to this lake.
I think that in Japan, as in Iceland, there are a lot of myths. And I believe that when you have a monster video, you have to have a myth to go along with it. And here, that happened, and I think that explains why this video that Hjörtur captured has gotten so much attention, international attention, and maybe especially from Japan, because they have similar myths. At some point, a TV crew came in from the United States, and they did all sorts of tests. I think that the tests that the American crew made don't prove that the video that Hjörtur took is fake. It only proves that debris floating in the river can look like a monster is swimming, but that doesn't tell us anything about what Hjörtur actually captured on his film.
And what about the strange phenomenon captured on camera in Birgir Brageson's car?
The video that the girl shot of some phenomenon, something happening on the lake, I think it's just some weather phenomenon. It's a little cyclop going over the water. We see it inland where it moves over land, taking up dust, and so I think we have a natural explanation.
I believe that we have two types of worms in the lake. There's the old 600 or 700 year old giant monster that might be living there, but I doubt it. And then there is the undiscovered organism. I don't believe in the 600 or 700 year giant monster, but I don't want to rule out that there might be an undiscovered life form living in the silt at the bottom of the lake.
Ultimately, until proof of Lagarfljótarmjörn's existence is produced, strange phenomena observed on the lake will continue to fuel belief in the legends of this rich region of Iceland. The children of the city of Eyjólfsstaður have a particularly fertile imagination. How could it be otherwise given that their school is located just across from Lake Lagarfljot?
I think young children, they believe very clearly in it. They absolutely believe that the worm is alive. And I asked my son that is 8 years old, do you believe in the worm? Yes, absolutely, I believe in it. I know it exists. And he described it for me, what it looked like. So it's very, very clear in his mind.
It's important because it's part of the community and part of our history, and it's linked with the imagination of the kids. When they do arts or drawings, something like that, they often draw the worm, and it helps them with their imagination, and it comes out in that way. And we use the saga when we teach them about the area, history of the area.
It starts with there was a little girl, and her mother gave her a little gold ring. That she opened the box and she was very afraid. Then the worm began to grow, and he grew bigger and bigger. Here he threw the box in the lake, and now here, this is for the end of the story.
I think it's very important because when I was a child, I was born here in the neighborhood. We really believed there were monsters in the lake. And we always were beware of it, and it was like part of the nature and very exciting. We are trying to keep it alive because, of course, it's nice to have a monster because today it's not eating people anymore. So you don't need to be afraid of it.
This thing is made from clay, and this is special for me because my daughter was very young. She was in 2nd class, and she decided to make Lagarfljótsorm, and I did not tell her to make Lagarfljótsorm. It was her decision. It's not big deal. It's not big deal that there are trees here around us, and it's also not big deal that there's mountain and there's lake and there are houses and we have this environment, and we have also this creature in the lake, and it's not big deal. It's just a common thing in our life.
The Lagarfljótmjörn plays an important role in the cultural and folk identity of this part of the country, where residents treat the mythical creature with great respect. There is no talk here of making a promotional or commercial effigy to attract tourists.
The main reason I think Icelandic people come to visit Fljótsdalshérað is it's so green. We have the trees here that most part of Iceland, they don't have as much trees as we do here. People love to visit because it's a great destination for families, and it has a beautiful scenery. People travel to the area. They do know that the lake is home of the Lagarfljót's worm, because it's a really popular children's story, and probably most of Icelandic people have heard the story at some point in their life.
And we use it as our symbol for the municipality. And that tells us how important he is for us. And you also see artworks, several artworks in Eilstar and this area that that are formed as a worm.
The poem is about the Lagarfljot's worm. It's tied to Húsatangi over there where the poem lived. So it was a very real thing to him, or at least he think a lot about it. And my daughter took this poem and made a tune and played it on a piano, and my wife and second daughter performed it in the church in Egilsstaðir last year. I think it's just an indication of that everybody knows about the worm. Everybody looks at the lake when they are driving around it, hoping to see something or expecting. So the worm is very much alive today.
Despite its seclusion, the valley in Iceland's eastern region attracts more and more tourists each year. The city of Egilsstaðir is essential since it is the only major metropolitan area around the lake. And it could be that the images of the giant worm circulated on social networks partly explain the recent increase in the number of visitors.
Tourists are coming to Iceland mainly because of the nature. That is the statistics says so. And then the second thing is the culture and heritage. But people here, I think they realize that, okay, maybe people are more interested in something like our worm monster than we thought, actually.
Meet the Locals is a program that we are doing, Tanni Travel, with local people in East Iceland, where we invite people to come as guests and saying goodbye as friends. We invite people to local homes where they can either have dinner or coffee and a chat with local people how it is to live here in the area. And our tour around the lake, Life Around the Monster Lake, offers you to see the monster, if you're lucky or not lucky, and to meet local people and ask them by yourself how it is to live by the lake.
Egilsstaðir is also the site of several annual festivals celebrating the cultural heritage of Eastern Iceland. The possible existence of a strange creature in Lake Lagarfljot provides a pretext to hold the region's most important annual festival, Ormteiti, which opens with a big party. Each August, visitors from across the country come to attend the parades, concerts, and cultural events that animate the city for an entire week. Whatever reason brings you to this unique area, make sure to always have a camera on hand.
The tourists that visit the lake area through us are mostly from the UK and America. But we also have a lot of people from Germany. And we get many requests from both Canada, we've had requests from Mexico, Australia.
Nei, ég hef aldrei séð skrímslið og ekkert sem að tengist því annað en þetta. En frá því ég kom hérna fyrir meira en hálfri öld, þá hef ég oft heyrt talað skrímslið. Ég hef lesið margar gamlar sögur skrímslið.
Ormurinn, hann menningarsögulegt fyrirbæri hér slóðir. Og ég held að trúi margir, flest allir héraðsbúar, að ormurinn sé til.
When you come to the lake area here, or the lake district here, it's, I think you should always be aware that there might be something moving under the surface of the lake, and just very, very occasionally it occurs above the surface. So you should always have your camera ready.